The title of this Reddit that you don't know about yet is Sexual Thoughts About My Therapist.
Oh, welcome to the Pleasure Program. My name is Holly.
I'm Victoria.
We are two licensed therapists who specialize in sex therapy, here to answer your questions, share our knowledge about all things related to a healthy and pleasurable sex life.
So, how do I start? I am a 41-year-old female, married, 3 kids, going through some mental health struggles. I've been seeing my therapist for almost a year. My therapist is female, and I've recently found myself sexually attracted to her. I've never been with a woman, nor do I find women attractive. However, over the past few weeks, I find myself drawn to her sexually. I've started watching girls in porn to further my fantasy about being with her. It's truly crazy this has happened. I feel like I should change therapists. However, I don't want to, as I've made progress with her, and I find it hard to connect with people to open up. My sexual fantasies are growing, and now I spend my weeks looking forward to our sessions. The interesting issue is when I'm in front of her, I don't find her attractive. My mind is very confused. Am I bisexual? Is this normal, being attracted to one female? How can I stop these feelings? Help.
This is fascinating.
This is great. I love this question.
So wait, when she's in front of her therapist, like literally with her in a session, she's not feeling the attraction.
Right.
It's only when she has left that session, it sounds like, the fantasies start.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. This is an interesting one.
I think we should start with transference, right? Like, let's talk about what transference even is for people. Like, start small. So transference, the definition is, it's described as an unconscious feeling that is transposed onto another significant individual. So this could look like someone reminding you of your brother. It's like you might have feelings of your brother for some, like you love your brother or you hate your brother. And if someone reminds you of your brother, you might be feeling those same exact feelings towards that person. Mm-hmm. So then there's additional layer of transference called erotic transference, where sometimes something is happening and a client develops sexual feelings for their therapist. They're transposing other feelings onto their therapist that generally actually has nothing to do with the actual therapist, like actually being sexually attracted to them.
Let's just normalize that. That's a common experience for if anyone listening has been to therapy or is considering going to therapy. The therapist kind of can become like a surrogate, right? Like they remind you of a sibling or maybe a parent or a good friend, and you start to feel like that type of those feelings towards your therapist in that way. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Let's say you had a difficult relationship with your mother, and then you see your therapist as sort of like a motherly or maternal figure. You kind of play out some of those dynamics that you might have with your actual mom, and when you can do it in a safe setting and explore what those dynamics really mean, it can be really healing. And you can kind of rewrite that narrative for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the same kind of thing with erotic transference. Not, hear me out here, that probably sounds bad at first. Hear me out, right? There's a reason that you're developing this erotic transference for your therapist. Erotic transference is actually fairly common. You know, and it's because if you go and you see a therapist and you're having a good experience, it's often this like corrective experience where you're getting empathy and compassion and warmth, and you feel really safe with that person. And oftentimes those feelings can be associated with like what you want in a romantic partnership, right? Or like what would help build desire for you in a romantic partnership. And so then you start to develop these like sexualized feelings for your therapist, which often you don't know a lot about your therapist. Like it's not really about them. It's just the experience that you're having and the experience that you want to have with a romantic partner. So I think it's normal that she's having these like sexualized feelings for her therapist, even though her therapist is a female, because she probably has those things in her like desire template, like the things that she would feel desire from, whatever her therapist is treating her as. I don't think it has to do with her sexuality.
Yeah, it might not have anything to do with her sexual orientation
Yeah.
or the fact that she's bisexual. I think you're right. Maybe it has more to do with what is this teaching her about what she does find desirable, what dynamics contribute to her own desire and arousal.
Exactly.
And she won't be able to really explore that if she doesn't tell her therapist.
Exactly. Or if she gets a new therapist, right? Like then we're just like avoiding, right? Like if you have erotic transference, you need to talk about it with your therapist and explore it, right? They're probably standard, going to set some boundaries with you and make sure that this isn't going to interfere to a point where the therapy is going to be unproductive, but it should be really explored to help gain some insight. One thing that I would discourage is seeking out porn that reminds her of her therapist, because I feel like that's really reinforcing the fantasy of this specific person rather than just like unraveling what this means in general. I don't know that that's healthy. What do you think about that?
I don't mean to laugh. I'm just like Googling like sex with my therapist. Like,
I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure there's lots.
I am sure there's plenty of material. I think she's considering like, what does this mean about my sexuality, or maybe what does it mean about my relationship with my husband, and like she's trying to figure it out on her own. So you can't blame her for it. But I think the best thing she could do is like put it out in the open.
I agree.
Like tell her therapist, as scary and as hard as that would be to say, like, okay, like I got to tell you something, and it's a bit weird, and I don't fully understand it. But every time I leave this session, I have sexual feelings, romantic feelings, like towards you, and it's confusing me, and I'm like trying to figure it out here, but like, what is this? What is happening? And you know, I think, gosh, a good therapist would hopefully just like stay calm, be like, okay,
normalize
let's like figure out. Yeah, it's almost like a funny cliche that like your client's gonna fall in love with you or something, or you know that happens, but like it became that way for a reason. I think it does happen,
and I would bet that she's not the first one to tell that therapist that.
Oh,
we've all had it.
We have.
You have not? You've never had a client tell you that they've had like sexual feelings?
Not that explicitly.
Not that explicitly.
Actually. Not that I think that I've suspected, or maybe that's sort of been implied, like references to finding me attractive. Yeah. What? Tell me about your experience.
I've had a client share that they were feeling guilty due to having like sexualized feelings, but the work was around sexual performance. So it really was not surprising because it's all like layered in there. And we talked about it, worked through it, and it was really, and I think they were just really relieved by me normalizing it, because it's very common.
Yeah. Well, think about, like, you feel like here's this person you're seeing, you know, every week, who's sitting there listening to you intently, caring about your experience, wanting to help you, guide you. I mean, how could you not develop some sort of like loving, potentially erotic or sexual, romantic kind of feelings in that kind of an environment?
Right. Like if you're processing a kink that you felt shame about your whole life, and you're getting like compassion and curiosity and warmth, like that might feel really amazing after feeling shame for so long, and then you might like misinterpret that in a way.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
No shame in that.
If I had a client tell me they were in love with me, or they found me, you know, attractive, and they wanted to have sex with me, like I would do my best to just like hear them out, listen, gather as much information, empathize with them with that experience. But I would likely go to my colleagues to be like, hey, this just happened. Can I talk about this with you? Can we kind of bounce ideas here and help me make sure I'm addressing this and handling it the right way? Here's a problem with therapists. There could be a lot of fear, like it spooks therapists. Like, this feels like could it be a boundary violation? What if I'm seen as being unethical or unprofessional if I keep working with somebody who has expressed that they have some sort of desire towards me, and then they just like refer out, right? Like, well, this is going to get in the way of our working relationship, so let's find you another therapist. And so that, I think, is further like encouraging that shame or that fear that person's feeling, like, oh, I shouldn't have said anything, or like
I'm going to be abandoned if I'm vulnerable. When you like research erotic transference a bit, there's a lot that comes up about how there is a lack of preparation in general, graduate schools for therapists about how to handle this kind of thing, even though it's really normal. But there is a lot of talk in grad schools about being ethical and being boundaried. And so, like you said, there are times where therapists can get spooked and refer out thinking that's what's best for the client, like well-intentioned, I think, and wanting to be ethical. But overall, that's misinformed because that's harmful to the client often, unless the client got to a point where they were like, I really can't get any work done here. Right. And then you might work together to try to like refer and have a new experience. But to just refer out a client and not have it be a collaborative kind of decision can be really harmful. So if that were to happen to you, if we're saying talk to your therapist, right? If that were to happen to you, it's not your fault at all. It's not because something's wrong with you or that you're weird or bad. It's because your particular therapist, very unfortunately, was not educated or informed in this.
Not prepared to how to handle it appropriately. And
right. And maybe you can test the waters a little bit by just asking their experience with transference in general, right? We talked about that. So it's like, what's your experience with transference? How have you handled people who maybe really liked you or really didn't like you because of someone in their life or an experience in their life, and see how they even approach that answer to see maybe if that's feeling safe to disclose.
I think it might be worth it just really quickly to talk about countertransference.
Okay.
Just
there's a lot of transference going on here.
Let's just add to the mix here.
Sure.
Transference is when your client, right, sort of projects an experience or feelings, or maybe sees you as a surrogate mom, partner, sibling, friend, whatever. Countertransference is when that experience happens from the therapist's perspective. So therapists sometimes see something that feels familiar or, brings up their own life experience in some way towards the client. And sometimes those feelings could be like attraction or a romantic feeling towards a client. Obviously that's complicated, and we're talking about boundaries and how to make sure you are appropriate and ethical and you're keeping that in check. It is ultimately the therapist's responsibility to protect and preserve the safety and the integrity of the work that they're doing with their clients.
Absolutely.
So we're human, right? We have our own life experiences, our own areas of concern that might be too challenging for us to work effectively with a client. So, and it's up to the therapist seeking guidance and supervision to make really good decisions that are what is best for that client and for themselves ultimately too. And I guess I just want to say, again, don't be afraid like every therapist you go to is going to like fall in love with you or like,
refer you out.
I
feel like we're getting real dark here. And you shouldn't know. If the therapist has any feelings towards you, should be no way that you know about that.
If a therapist ever expressed that to you, red flags. And you know what's making me think about this? I have been listening to.
I feel like we're going off somewhere else.
We are off the rails right now. What's making me think about this is going to be so random. I have been listening to, if anyone is a true crime fan.
Oh my God, I survived.
No.
What is happening right now? Because I know I'm a queue up. I survived. I was like, what is happening?
No, by the way, do not listen to I Survived. If anyone's listening, that is very, very triggering podcast. Dateline. All right, a little more tame.
Much better.
Yeah. The Eric and Lyle. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I'm already getting it wrong.
Menendez brothers.
The Menendez brothers, right? Okay. So their story, because it's very much like at the forefront of people's minds if you're a true crime fan, they got like information that these brothers confessed to the murder of their parents from I think a psychologist who was treating one or both of the brothers. So a therapist role, right? And this therapist.
Where are we going with this?
I might cut all this out. All right. This therapist was having a sexual relationship, a romantic relationship with another client.
Wow,
which, by the way,
does not
is
understand.
a huge no. It's a huge no. But so he has this relationship with another client. He asks this woman to sit in the waiting room to like keep an eye on the office because the brothers were coming in, or one of the brothers were coming in, and they were going to be talking about this like obviously very serious crime that was just committed, and he was feeling nervous because like maybe they might do something to me, so he has her just like keep watch over this like in the waiting room, and she overhears like the brothers talking to each other, and one saying, now we have to kill the psychologist or the therapist or whatever his role was. Anyway, I just want to say, for the record, no therapist should ever have a sexual relationship with a client. Huge no. For sure, no. A way to ruin your career and have your license revoked. And
that's a great point, Holly, because it's like if we're telling people to be honest about their erotic transference, if you were to tell your therapist that you're having sexual failings and they were like, really? Me too. Run.
This is, and what harm, how harmful to your like safe, you're supposed to be safe.
Yeah. Run.
And like be able to explore everything in your sessions. Your therapist should be a safe person.
Yeah.
The second it starts becoming about your therapist and what they want, and they're now like using the relationship to their own advantage,
run.
It completely discredits all the work that you've done and is hugely unethical. That person should not be a therapist, I feel.
I totally agree.
Strongly about that. Well, I mean, we're a sex education platform
exactly.
here. So I think we're talking about transference, and of course I brought up counter-transference the other way.
But no, that fits perfectly because we're telling people to be honest, and they need to know appropriate reactions to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
Well, all right. I think I got us off the rails long enough. We hope that you found this this Reddit reaction helpful, and let us know. Leave us a comment. Have you ever had any sort of sexual feelings towards a therapist, or struggled with any kind of transference towards a therapist?
Yeah.
We'd like to hear your experience.